All right, good evening, everyone. It is so great to be with the Gemstone community tonight. I hope that you are all staying safe, healthy, and well. The 2020-2021 academic year marks Gemstone's 25th anniversary at the University of Maryland, and we are so excited to celebrate this milestone with all of you. My name is Laura Fu. I am a member of the Gemstone class of 2017, and I am proud to be serving as the chair of Alumni Engagement Initiatives for the 25th anniversary. So 25 years, a quarter of a century. And yes, the Gemstone program and I are the same age. And in that quarter of a century, Gemstone has had some really amazing accomplishments. The most obvious one is that Gemstone was the first of its kind to exist on any college campus in the United States. A 4-year interdisciplinary team research program of this scale, rigor, and commitment had never been done before. But Bill Dessler, the dean of the engineering school at the time, saw a need and a niche. Gemstone's dual commitment to creating new knowledge and developing collaborative, innovative, globally minded students has resulted in impressive advancements in undergraduate academic research and student leadership development. Many Gemstone teams present their research at national and international conferences, and several have been published in major academic journals. We are so proud to have so many Gemstone graduates go on to pursue advanced degrees across a wide variety of disciplines, many of them inspired by the work they did during their time in Gemstone. Others have made an impact outside of academia. We have graduates working at Pixar, the White House Office of Management and Budget, Lockheed Martin, and many more. Gemstone graduates are everywhere, and I speak from firsthand experience when I say that the Gemstone experience enriches its students academically, personally, and professionally. The program has accomplished a great deal in the past quarter century, and it will continue in its pursuit of excellence over the next quarter century and beyond. I am delighted to kick off our 25th anniversary year of celebration with a night with the directors. It is a rare opportunity to be able to hear from so many Gemstone leaders, and tonight we'll get some insight into their perspective and involvement in Gemstone's past, present, and future. We'll continue to celebrate Gemstone throughout this academic year through a variety of events and programming, and you can stay in the loop about upcoming events and initiatives through a variety of ways, which you can see on your screen now. I will hand it over now to Dave Lovell, who's the current director of Gemstone, to say a few words and introduce tonight's moderators. Dave, take it away.
Thank you, Laura. And let me echo your welcome to everyone who's on this webinar with us. Thank you for joining us tonight. And like Laura, I hope that everybody's staying safe. Gemstone's tenure on campus coincides pretty nearly with my own. So I've been privileged over my career to witness its impact and to have played a small role at various stages. I understand these are not exactly celebratory times, but perhaps that makes it even more important to remember to celebrate our milestones and to see where can we paint ourselves in the palette of our times. At moments like these, we can get caught up myopically in trying to figure out how to survive the next 25 days or the next 25 weeks. But it's events like this one that give us a chance to take a larger view. Zoomed out, if you'll pardon the pun. So we can think maybe about a potential 50 years of a program, 25 of which have already transpired and 25 for which we're only beginning to write the script. I'm looking forward to tonight's dialogue and also to the various conversations and initiatives that are likely to be inspired by our reflections. The development of Gemstone over the last 25 years has undoubtedly required a great deal of tenacity, creativity, thoughtfulness, and flexibility. And so in the spirit of flexibility, we had to make a few last-minute changes to our program for tonight. Drs. Dessler and Cole are unable to join us this evening due to last-minute medical concerns, but don't worry, they are on the mend and we wish them well. We will certainly miss their presence, their knowledge, and their reflections this evening. I am excited to share, however, that Dr. Kristen Skendel, our current Gemstone Associate Director, will be joining the panel in place of Dr. Cole. Dr. Skendel served alongside Dr. Cole and can speak to the history, progress, and stories that we have to tell during the period that was his tenure as director of the program. At this point, I have the pleasure of introducing our hosts for this evening, Ria Sebastian and Thomas Hahn. Ria is a senior Gemstone student and currently serves as the president of our Gemstone Leadership Council and a member of Team Tumor. Thomas graduated from Maryland with his Gemstone citation in 2005 and he currently serves as the chair of our Gemstone Alumni Board. Thomas was a member of Team Drugs.
Thank you, Dr. Lovell. We're excited to be here. As he mentioned, we are certainly missing two of our panelists today, but we hope we'll find an opportunity to connect with Dr. Dessler and Dr. Cole in the future to hear about their time in Gemstone at some point during our anniversary year. But in turning to our panelists that are with us this evening, we want to welcome Dr. Thomas Fuja and Dr. James Wallace, past directors of Gemstone. Dr. Fuja served as the Gemstone director early on and is currently a professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering at the University of Notre Dame. Dr. Fuja is also the director of the Industry Labs, which is an initiative funded by the Lilly Endowment to create a platform between Notre Dame and the regional industry. Dr. Wallace served as director of Gemstone for 11 years before retiring from Maryland in 2012. He is a professor emeritus in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. We're also excited to have Dr. Kristen Skendel with us. Dr. Skendel joined the Gemstone team as an associate director in the summer of 2012, and most recently she served as our interim director prior to Dr. Lovell's appointment. In her role with Gemstone, Dr. Skendel teaches GEMS 104 and GEMS 202, as well as works very closely with the research teams, faculty, mentors, and librarians. Thank you, Dr. Skendel, for joining us on such short notice.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. We're excited to get this panel kicked off for the night with the directors. Dr. Wallace, we're going to start with you, partly because I get to ask the first question and partly because you were my Gemstone director while I was in the program. And we want to keep this fun and lively tonight. The goal is for this to be a good time, interactive. There is a Q&A option in the Zoom. So if you have questions, that will be moderated and we'll try to get those into the panelists as well. So for all the attendees, please use the Q&A option. But Dr. Wallace, I'm going to come back to you. So in the spirit of keeping this fun, I would love for you to tell us one of your, I'll say, most interesting stories with regards to your tenure at the program. You told us one a little bit before we kicked off the actual panel, but I didn't know if you had another one up your sleeve. And Dr. Wallace, you're on mute.
There we go. Now you
Perfect.
can hear me, right?
Of course, we got you.
Well, the story I told, and bears repeating perhaps, was with regard to GEMS Camp. GEMS Camp came about, I think in my first year. There was a student, I forget her name, who was a senior my first year, and she had the idea that an orientation for freshmen would be a really nice thing to do. And she worked with Rebecca Thomas, who was the associate director, to develop GEMS Camp. And that first camp, Rebecca reserved a camp somewhere up by Frederick. And shortly before the camp was to occur, there was an electrical storm, and I think it knocked out the pump and all the water for that camp. And we had to scramble and ended up on a very rainy day in a kind of pavilion, an open on the side pavilion with rain, cats and dogs, having our very first GEMS Camp. And everybody, the whole freshman class that year, plus the camp, I forget what did we call them, Thomas?
Probably camp
leaders,
counselors, I'm guessing, something like that. Yeah.
Leaders. We all stayed in a motel in Rockville. So
yes, we did.
It was a real scramble, but in the end, it was a real bonding experience, and that was our kickoff GEMS Camp. It got better after that.
Yes, it did. It was a fun one, though. I remember that one intimately, and I believe Rebecca's actually on as an attendee tonight. So
well, good.
Super glad to have you, Rebecca.
I hope we get to see Rebecca. Rebecca did an incredible job from the very beginning with Gemstone, and much of the development of Gemstone is due to Rebecca. thinking of Rebecca and the other staff who were there when I first came on. I was professor, as you said, in mechanical engineering, and Bill Dessler had become the provost at Maryland, and Merriman Farbarden was the engineering dean. And at that time, Gemstone had been founded, initiated by Bill Dessler, and was administratively housed in the engineering college. And so Farbarden called me one morning, right about 2 weeks before, actually before 9/11 in 2001, and asked me to come down to his office. I was sitting at my office about to write a proposal, a research proposal for more funding for my research program. I went downstairs to his office, and he asked me if I would consider being the Gemstone director. I think after you, Tom Fuji, I think Chris Davis from electrical engineering had been the director. In any case, I said I would think about it, and I located a couple of students in the program and talked to them. And at least at that time, the program was relatively new and had some difficulties. It had, Tom probably can attest to this. There was a real hype about Gemstone, how wonderful it was, and it wasn't entirely being realized, I should say. Yeah. So anyway, I went over to Ellicott Hall and met with the staff. The staff were all meeting. They were all located in what is now the study room in Ellicott.
Yeah.
That was the staff office where all the offices are and the team rooms and so on. That was formerly the weight room for the football team. It still smelled like it. So anyway, I met with the staff, Rebecca Thomas, Vicki Hill, and Angela Dawson, and we talked a while. And I remember saying that going forward, we had to have one mantra. Our mantra had to be, don't promise anything you can't deliver, and deliver everything you promise. So from that point on, we tried to do that. And slowly over the years, I could talk more later about how we began to try to build some systems and infrastructure and processes that became what is Gemstone today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Wallace.
Right.
Thank you. Directing, now shifting a little bit towards Dr. Fuja. You weren't with us for very long, but I'm sure you probably saw the impact that Gemstone and its students have on the university and society as a whole. So we were hoping you could share an inspiring moment from your time in Gemstone.
Firing. Okay. I think probably it would be better if I just put in context kind of what my role was at the very beginning of Gemstone. I was approached by Bill Dessler in the summer of 1995. I think he had just become dean, or he had been dean for a relatively short period. And this idea of starting something, a vertically integrated program, interdisciplinary, with a focus on technology at the center, had been something that he had been talking about for a little while. I, at the time, was the associate director of the Institute for Systems Research, the associate director for education. So it's kind of natural for him to come to me to talk about the possibility, would the Institute for Systems Research and College of Engineering be interested in taking the idea that he formulated and running with it. And we did. Bill, like I mentioned at the time, was the dean of the College of Engineering. He actually had been the chair of electrical engineering when I was hired back in 1987. So Bill had hired me. He asked me to do this, and so of course I said yes. And as you all know better than I do, the basic idea would be research projects carried out by groups of interdisciplinary teams of undergraduates throughout their 4 years. And they'd focus on technology and the implications. So I came on board. I was the first director. I was only director for about 18 months, and most of that time there actually were no students. In the sense that the first class, I believe, came in '96, but we started planning the curriculum, planning the structure of the program. We hired our first staff member, Lois Powers. She was the first Gemstone coordinator at the time, the only Gemstone. That was in the spring of 1996. And the first class of Gemstone students were recruited in the program in the fall of '96. I think I sat down, and I still found it out on the NSF webpage the other day. I wrote an NSF grant to get some funding to get the program started. And I believe the first course it was part of the Gemstone curriculum was by a gentleman named Robert Friedel in the history department that fall of 1996. But about the time all that was happening, I was approached by the National Science Foundation and asked if I would be willing to serve as a program director for communications research at NSF. And I'd been part of Gemstone for less than a year. We'd only had students for a couple of months. So I was reluctant, but it was also an opportunity that I didn't really feel I could turn down. So I took a leave of absence from the University of Maryland in January 1997 to go to NSF. And as Jim said, I think that Chris Davis took over for me. So, to the extent that the ball got dropped and Jim had to pick it up, I'll just blame it on Chris. I don't think he's in the audience. Anyway, so I was at NSF for about a year and a half, and then I never really came back to Notre Dame. I took a job at the University of, I never came back to Maryland. After I left NSF, I went to Notre Dame, and I've been on the faculty here at Notre Dame for 22 years. It's interesting to me to see elements of the Gemstone program, elsewhere. Now you see it in a number of different programs. If you're familiar with the National Academy Grand Challenges program, I see elements of Gemstone in that. Georgia Tech runs something called the Vertically Integrated Projects, or VIP program. Again, the idea being that you carry out projects over the course of 2 or 3 or 4 years with technology at the center. So I think it was certainly ahead of its time. I think that it was a great idea, and I have to tell you, as somebody who left Gemstone at a time when it just barely existed, to see what Jim and the rest of you did with it over all these years is nothing short of amazing.
Thank you, Dr. Fujit. That was awesome. All right, I've got a question for Dr. Lovell. I wanted to kind of transition to you a little bit and start to talk about how much we love and enjoy the program, right? As a student, obviously it is, it's life-shaping in a lot of ways. And I'm curious, from your seat now being the new director, what it was that compelled you to get pulled towards the program and want to sign up for what frankly is definitely quite a challenging role.
I'm off mute. Good. Maybe I'm learning what I'm doing here. Yeah, that's a good question. So since we're all doing a little bit of a history lesson, it's too bad Bill Dessler's not here, because I wanted to say that I joined the faculty at the University of Maryland in '97, and he was the dean. So I don't expect he remembers having the interview with me, but all prospective faculty members have to have an interview with the dean. And of course you fret over that because it's usually not someone from your department, and you're just deathly afraid of what kinds of questions they're going to ask and all of that. So he was the one who took me through that ritual, and it's nice to hear his, hear stories about this thing that he helped to create, become the thing that it is. Gemstone is constantly evolving and improving. I think any of the generations of people who've been involved with it would be able to tell stories about what it looked like when they started and what it looked like when they finished, and how different innovations had been added along the way. It is challenging. When I was interviewing, there were, I had to come up with, okay, so I could tell the story. Look, I've been involved with Gemstone. I've been a mentor. I think the students are great. So of course I want to do this, but they were going to expect a lot more of me than that. I think they wanted to hear if I had any ideas. And I was thinking about, well, everybody else has done such a great job with this thing. What do I have to offer? Part of the history lesson there, as Jim mentioned, was that Gemstone started as an engineering program. I think it fairly quickly morphed to include some other STEM type components, computer science and other things. But most recently, it has had its academic home in the Honors College. So we have a challenge of trying to expand our research portfolio further into all of the reaches of campus. We have departments that are not well represented. We have groups of students that are not well represented. And I think we could probably come up with some really cool projects that students could work on, even outside maybe of their own major. Not everybody wants to spend all day, every day working on their major. Maybe their coursework could be one thing, their research project could be a different thing, and maybe there are research projects out there that a very diverse team of people could really do something interesting with. The other thing I was talking about, I think there are still some elements of the research enterprise, and particularly I like to focus on dissemination. I think we could be doing a lot more with that, and maybe I'll say a little bit more about that later. From a personal side, I'm a professor in engineering, so most of my calendar is filled up with research stuff. I've also spent a lot of time working with undergraduate groups like the Clark Scholars and Engineers Without Borders and the Society of American Military Engineers. So I made the case that I had some experience to offer in that area, and apparently they bought it because they offered me the job. But look, purely selfishly, I think we would all be willing to admit that Gemstone has the best students and the best staff on campus. So why would I not want to be here?
Love that. Love that. Thank you, Dr. Lovell.
Thank you, Dr. Lovell. So as I mentioned before, prior to Dr. Lovell joining us, Dr. Skendel was actually our interim director for this past year. And although I personally got to witness it because she was my director, I was hoping she could share with us a little bit about her time and what she thought was her most inspiring, or one of her most inspiring stories from her time as director.
Thank you, Ria, and everyone else. It's been really fun to hear the history and the ways that folks have connected with Gemstone over time. It reminded me of when I first connected with Gemstone back when Thomas was a student, and I would come and do GEMS 100 TA trainings for service learning. So it really feels full circle. To echo what Dr. Lovell said, I think the staff and the students in Gemstone are really a treasure and a gem. We come together over all sorts of opportunities. And in the spring, with the COVID disruption and the move to emergency remote learning, I think the way that the students and staff came together and pivoted and adapted was remarkable. The thesis conference was moved to entirely virtual, and the seniors did an outstanding job. The mentors did an outstanding job. The discussant feedback was the best I've ever seen. Team formation was also completely virtual, working with our new teams who have only met in the virtual environment and watching how they have dedicated their time to their research and one another has been really inspiring. And I think the one piece that has really shaped where we're going this year and beyond has been the efforts to really center equity in our conversations and curriculum. And this came from a collaborative effort of our staff, students, and community, as well as alumni. So in the wake of the George Floyd murder and the uprisings of the summer, our community came together and said, what is our role in addressing equity? And certainly research plays an important part in that process, as does the team experience. And so I think for me, the focus on equity and how we've shaped the curriculum for this year and what that will help Gemstone look like in the next 25 years has been really inspiring and exciting and an honor to be a part of.
Thank you, Dr. Skendel. And yes, I do remember that time when you were teaching or helping to train some of the GEMS 100 leaders. Dr. Wallace, I want to circle back to you for a second. So you talked a little bit about some of the accomplishments and infrastructure that were put in place with regards to the program during your tenure. I'd like to hear how you think about the program and what you think the biggest advantage of the program is, because I think kind of from the early days, kind of through kind of some middle year transitions, I think that probably shifted while you were director. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on that. And you are on mute.
Good, thanks. Well, when I think back at how I used to pitch Gemstone to prospective students and their parents, I would talk about the team research experience and say that whether or not a student goes on professionally to become a researcher, a professional researcher, working in a team and developing the skills that are involved in original research, creating new knowledge, will be something that will stand them well for their whole lives, their whole professional careers, no matter what they do. Being able to think about problems that haven't been thought through before, develop a plan for carrying out the research and carrying that through to completion with a team of their peers, and persevering in face of obstacles and difficulties, will develop skills and character traits that will serve them well. And I think probably all of you who have been Gemstone students, I think probably can attest to that. So in terms of the value of Gemstone, I see that as the great value. It's not so much the individual project that you work on, it's the process of being involved in that project. I think that's probably the best way I could put it.
I love that answer. I love that answer. It's part of the pitch that I remember coming in and learning about the program is exactly that. And it's definitely one of the things that has stood out to me as probably the defining kind of characteristic of the program. What I think's interesting is I think you've touched on a little bit of the question that was asked around kind of STEM and kind of how really Gemstone might have been one of the first kind of interdisciplinary programs around that style of research. Just as a reminder to kind of everybody that's on the webinar or all the attendees on the webinar, there is a Q&A box that you guys can put questions in. We've got 4 in there already. I know some folks are working behind the scenes to get you answers, and we'll ask some towards the end of the panel as well. So please get those in and queued up.
Just one other comment, maybe a little humorous comment. I remember one GEMS, what was the student council called?
Yeah, GEMS, GSC, if it
GSC.
still is that, I
It
believe.
used to be called Gemstone Student Council. Now it's the Gemstone Leadership Council.
I see.
GLC, there you go.
Used to be the student council. Anyway, one group on the student council were trying to raise a little money and creating T-shirts and sweatshirts, and they were coming up with logos, the GEMS logo, and they wanted to put on the backs of these sweatshirts and T-shirts, "Research happens." And I said, no, it doesn't. You have to actually do it. And it's hard work.
Yes. Yes, indeed. I might own that sweatshirt, by the way. I will have to see if I find it. If I find it, I will try to I'll try to get Leia a picture of that sweatshirt. But I know exactly what you're referring to, Dr. Wallace. But that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Ria.
Sure. So the next question is for Dr. Fuja. You talked a little bit about where you went after Gemstone, but if you want to expand a little bit on how Gemstone fit into your career path and how you think your experience here shaped your path after Gemstone.
Sure. Well, undergraduate research, as it is at most universities, is huge at Notre Dame. I mean, I think in the electrical engineering department, we would have typical, by the time students would graduate, we had about 2/3 of our undergraduates who had either carried out undergraduate research projects for credit or, as a summer job, something like that. So I think that Gemstone was part of, the conditioning that got me to the point where I appreciated the importance of undergraduate research, both as contributing to the research mission, but also as part of an educational program. The notion of interdisciplinarity. I think one of the reasons Bill Dessler originally came, and talked to me about this at the Institute for Systems Research was interdisciplinarity was fundamental, really, and I assume still is fundamental. The ISR, the Institute for Systems Research, the idea that you can't really fully understand a problem if you only look at it from one dimension. That you have to understand not only the technology, but the economics, the sociological and the psychological perspectives. And I think that is another element that Gemstone does that very few other programs do, at least do as well. But I just think that having that exposure, that seeing what undergraduate education, what undergraduate research can do for the students and how fun it can be. I think that was something that I took with me to Notre Dame and has been part of me for ever since, for the last 22 years.
Thank you, Dr. Fuja. All right, Dr. Lovell, you're back up. So you talked a little bit about your experience and really a lot of actual experience with the program before being director. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, of kind of seeing how the program interacts with the rest of the university and the impact it can make.
Yeah, so I was mentor for 2 Gemstone teams from 2002 to 2008. So those who are familiar with the evolution of an assistant professor, I started in '97, which means around 2002, I would have been trying to put the finishing touches on my tenure application and trying to have some gems on there, not to borrow a phrase, that would stand out to people and make it clear that I had really sort of bought into the mission of the university and was on board with what they were trying to do and was trying to show some initiative. So that personally, that was why I thought something like a Gemstone team would be interesting. Since then, I've also served as a discussant and occasionally a campus expert, helping in the early stages of project development for some of the teams. My 2 teams honestly had some of the best students I've ever worked with. One of them stayed with me, finished both his master's and his PhD at Maryland with me as his advisor. Some of the other students went on to do PhDs or other advanced degrees at MIT, at the University of Washington, other places. I've attended 3 weddings, and I still stay in touch with quite a few of those former students, and in a couple of cases, their parents, who I would.
That's awesome.
Along the way, yeah. I think the impact of me personally was that these teams gave me an opportunity to think about a wider variety of problems than I would have thought of on my own. They worked with me, but they also commingled in my lab, and they worked with graduate students that had very different projects, but they found interfaces where they could. They had some tangential connections to the research of several of my early PhD students. They became, sort of helpers when we had to go actually do stuff. I was doing a lot of work with Nissan and automotive electronics and things like that at the time. So I had plenty of volunteers that wanted to go out and tinker with a car and put in sensors and radars and all that stuff. But they also helped shape the ideas that for me eventually became funded research with Nissan and with the National Science Foundation. And honestly, I don't think I'm unique in that aspect. I've heard lots of similar stories from many Gemstone mentors. So it really serves as a good incubation process and a good idea generator. It doesn't hurt to remember that Maryland, like Notre Dame and plenty of other places, is a tier 1 research university. And
Yes.
Gemstone is one of the programs that allows our undergraduate students a chance to fully participate in that endeavor. And in our case, it's from their very first day as freshmen. I appreciate the value and necessity of learning what others already know, but I think giving students a glimpse into the realm of knowledge creation really sparks their creativity. It also fuels their performance in their regular classwork because it gives them a working outlet for the topics that they're learning in class. And then finally, I think we know as a society and as a planet that if we don't want to keep making the same mistakes, then we need progress. And in many ways, progress comes from research and innovation in a lot of different areas. And Gemstone is doing its part to cultivate the next generation of progress makers.
I love that, Dr. Lovell. Thank you so much. Dr. Skendall, I'm going to switch it up on you, and I'm going to actually ask a question that came in via the Q&A because I love it, and I think it actually speaks exactly to Dr. Lovell's comment. So can you maybe give us a little bit on what the current research projects are that the students are doing in the program? And then maybe talk about over your tenure, how you've seen them shift. If there's any trends or kind of direction towards that shift.
Absolutely. One of the best parts of my job is working with the teams, and they are doing such innovative, cutting edge research constantly. We have teams that are spanning the disciplines right now, several working with faculty in public health. One team, Team Flow, a junior team, is interested in access to menstrual health products and disparities and perceptions of menstruation in the US, particularly in the sort of Maryland, Baltimore, DC area. Much of what's been researched on this topic has been international and not very locally focused. We have another team, actually Ria's team, I think is a really cool and very relevant project right now, especially as colon cancer has been more in the news with the recent death of Chadwick Boseman. Ria's project has been looking at an innovative localized chemotherapy treatment for colon cancer for resection surgery. And she can share more about the details of that as it has shifted. And then some really cool engineering projects as well. Brian Quinn, who's on his third Gemstone team, Team Formula, is interested in creating an opportunity for electric vehicles to have better access to charging. One of the challenges of the electric vehicles is the range anxiety, and the team is trying to work out a creative way to allow those vehicles to be charged as they're driving on the highway. There are many more. We have 35 active teams right now. There are some trends over time that I think we have seen, and they kind of come in batches. We have a lot of aerospace projects right now. Dr. Aiken, who was actually an initial mentor with the first cohort of teams way back in 96, 97 to 2000. He's on his, I think, fourth Gemstone team in recent years, so in sort of a row. And so lots of teams kind of interested around space exploration, space-related projects. We went through another phase a couple of years ago with a lot of interest in additive manufacturing and 3D printing and looking at that from many different perspectives, whether that was in biomedical applications or robotics applications. At one point during my tenure, we had a lot of focus on exploring Alzheimer's disease in terms of treatments, as well as understanding the pathology of Alzheimer's. I think we had hit every single researcher on campus to serve as a mentor who does any work in terms of Alzheimer's disease. I think what the Gemstone teams do really well, and what's really fun in watching them form, is that at the point that the teams are forming and budding researchers, they don't know what they don't know in a way that people who have been engaged in the work for a long time are sort of limited in their thinking because something may have been tried or has already been explored. So the students come up with ideas that spark a lot of interest and are very cutting edge, and it's they tend to start to explore them, and then we start to see them popping up in more research journals or being more explored across a variety of places. I also think they have been really adaptive and thinking about, as they start down a path, they may intend to go in one direction and then realize through their literature review, through their initial prototyping or data gathering, that the project that they thought they were going to explore didn't make sense or wasn't working how they hoped. And so they've been adjusting and pivoting. A few teams in this COVID time have actually thought about how their project might connect back to COVID-19 and many of the related implications of that, whether that's around drug metabolization or the impact on communities. So there's a lot of different cool ways that the teams have been engaged in their research. I have learned so much just from reading their theses. I haven't taken biology or chemistry since before they were born, but I feel proficient enough in learning through their projects.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Skendel.
Yeah, I remember one time Dr. Skendel told me she was able to like reason with her doctor because of what she had read in somebody's thesis. So it's good to see that it's helpful in other fields besides research. Yeah, so our next question is going back to Dr. Fuja. As you know, Gemstone is a living and learning program. So in our first year, we are not required, but recommended to live with our cohort. And many of us go on to live with our cohort, even past our first year, living in apartments and stuff like that. So our question we have for you is, what do you feel is the biggest opportunity for living and learning programs to create impact?
Before the attendees came in, we were told we wouldn't be graded on our responses. So I'm going to invest them right now. Because again, put in context, I mean, I was part of Gemstone with students 25 years ago for 4 months. So the point being that I don't really have much experience in terms of a living and learning program. It was not that. The hall had not been established during that first year. So it's really difficult for me to come up with that because, I mean, frankly, I don't think we have anything like that at Notre Dame. It's not that I'm familiar with. So to ask me, what do I think comes from it? I think there are people here who are much better equipped to answer that.
Well, hold on. I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy because I actually like that Rhea asked you that question, partly because of your outsider opinion on this. So you made the comment that Notre Dame does not have living and learning programs kind of in the same vein as Gemstone. I'm curious as to maybe why not, or why you think that Maryland has kind of caught on to something there.
I mean, I've seen those kinds of programs mainly in the context of honors colleges,
Okay.
Where there are dorms that are designated the homes for honors college. Notre Dame does not have an honors college. It doesn't have a university-wide honors program. I think Arts and Letters has an honors program, but the university does not. It's just not part of the experience, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that was developed there.
Sure.
So, but no, I mean, I remember that as being an important element of that. I mean, really vital. It was part of Bill Dessler's vision. But I know there are some members out there because I just saw one of the questions was from Riffy, who was part of that initial class of who came in 1996. I honestly don't remember if they had their own space in year one or not. I remember touring an empty space, but I don't remember if that was before the freshmen came in or if that was during the first academic year. So sorry, I'm gonna take a whiff on this.
No, I like it. And I actually appreciate the answer with regards to Notre Dame, because I think the context is interesting here, right? As we talk about living learning programs and we talk about what we feel is frankly very normal, right? As the Gemstone community, this is literally our shared experience, right?
Sure.
And you're providing what I think is a very valid thing, which is saying, hey, look, this is unique. This is differentiated. This is something that frankly Maryland has and in some ways should be proud to have.
Absolutely.
And to have 25 years of. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Fuja. I actually think that's exactly the answer we wanted to get out of the question. So appreciate that. Dr. Wallace, I'm going to pivot to you. Go
Thomas,
ahead.
I might add to what Tom Fugia said. Gemstone is part of a larger effort at Maryland to develop living learning programs. There's also the College Park Scholars Program and others. I was actually a director in College Park Scholars of their Science, Technology, and Society program before I became the Gemstone director. And there was an attempt in the early 90s that Gemstone was a later comer. College Park Scholars predated that, to develop these living learning programs. That the idea was that if students live together, socialize together, and learn together, that would be an enhancement to their education. And I think that's proved to be the case.
That's awesome. And I want to ask you a question in that vein. Obviously, you saw quite a bit of change. I'm curious as to what you think of as one of the larger accomplishments kind of in the transition from the early years of the program to a more mature Gemstone program that we know today.
I think that the development of a solid and rigorous curriculum and a process that students go through from the first semester onward, right up to the thesis conference, a process whereby they in the second semester they go through this process of developing thesis topics, engaging possible topics from potential mentors. In the first sophomore semester, developing a thesis, developing their team and how they're going to approach their research, presenting that to a panel of experts, and then launching their research together, being held accountable at various stages for their progress, and then finally completing that, writing the thesis and presenting it at the thesis conference. I think that structure is what's made, that's kind of the heart of the program, the skeleton on which the program is built, in which gives students a process that if they stick with it, they will greatly benefit by the end of the program. For me, that's at least the 11 years I was involved, that was what I felt was our greatest achievement, to build on what had gone before and to flesh that out so that it operates well.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Wallace. Dr. Skendel, I'm going to ask you another audible question. So we've got a couple questions that have come in, and I don't want you to steal too much of Dr. Lovell's thunder. I know he's going to talk towards the end of this about the direction of the program. But we've had several questions come in about incorporating more women into STEM, making sure that we're representative in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, kind of all of the above. I'm curious as to how you think about Dr. Cole's tenure, right? And how things began to kind of come to the forefront around frankly, all of these issues societally, and really kind of where we think the program is going to head to address these going forward.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting to think about the history of sort of women in STEM in the past 25 years, and to think about what that was like from 1995 to the early 2000s and what it's like now. I think the evidence of the efforts that happened 25 years ago are very evident now. I'm about the age of the oldest Gemstone alums. I graduated college in 2001. And when I was coming through K through 12, I didn't know a lot about engineering. If I did, I probably would have come to the University of Maryland instead of attending a liberal arts institution. And so now when we look at our Gemstone student body, we have many more students who identify as women and women identified in STEM fields. And so there is we don't have as many mentors who are women in STEM right now. And part of that is a systemic challenge that we have, one, on the tenure path as an institution of higher education, and two, women and faculty of color are often being asked to serve in many different roles on campus on a variety of committees and taking on more mentoring roles than some of their counterparts. And so I think it can be challenging for some of our mentors to also take on a Gemstone team, though we have been very intentional in recent years of reaching out and being thoughtful about the representation of our mentors and our librarians and engaging in conversations about identity in that way. So I think in terms of women in STEM, actually, I was recently on a call with some of our student leaders, and they were primarily women identified folks, and so in STEM fields. And so I think that shift is very evident when working with our students. I love the question about representation for the Honors College and the University of Maryland, and that is something that we still have room to grow. But certainly in my tenure, we have seen lots of changes in terms of the demographic representation of the students in Gemstone. On race and ethnicity, first gen status, where students are coming from, their gender identity. So we are making progress in that area. And as a Gemstone community and an honors community, really engaged in intentional conversations about how do we do better in actively recruiting and retaining students who have a variety of identities. And this year, as I mentioned earlier, we've implemented many changes to the curriculum that center conversations on equity, from both a piece around equity in the research design process and how it's important to think about moving from object building to systems thinking, and how all of the systems that we live in right now have been intentionally designed, and using the equity-centered community design model as the foundation, we can dismantle current systems and design new systems with equity at the center. And we've also been very intentional about having the teams engage in conversations about who they are as human people with personal and social identities, working with a diverse group of others for an extended period of time, and thinking about how those important lessons will carry on beyond their time in Gemstone, whether that's in the professional world or in their personal lives, but the importance of being able to have conversations within and across difference and think about their identities.
Thank you, Dr. Skendel. Rhea, I think we've exhausted all the questions, and it looks like from a Q&A perspective, we kind of got through everything. Jeremy might have just sent one in. All right, we'll audible. Dr. Wallace, Jeremy gave you a softball, and I think we should ask it of you, which I know you remember, Jeremy. After Dr. Wallace's comment, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Lovell to close with some comments about the future direction of the program. But Dr. Wallace, I'll give you this one because I think you'll have fun with it. You made the comments kind of early about when you came into the program, frankly, where it was. Can you talk about how different the program was when you left, and kind of why you decided to make some of the changes that you decided to make?
Well, I'm almost certain that I talked to Jeremy about this when I first began. I remember having a long conversation with him. It really was implementing a rigorous structure to the program that in the years that the staff and I were together, Rebecca Thomas, Vicki Hill, Angela Dawson, we just slowly over time worked on trying to develop a process whereby students, if they stuck with it, would have the benefits of learning how to do team research. And some of that was in place when we began, but it wasn't completely formed. And so we worked hard at doing that during those years, and beginning to connect with people around the campus to try to expand the scope of Gemstone beyond engineering. Remember, two of the people I recruited as mentors was Dave Lovell and Frank Cole, who became directors. And
well done.
They mentored multiple teams. The current dean of the CMNS college was a Gemstone mentor of at least one team, maybe more. So Gemstone reached out and expanded throughout the university. I think I'd like to know how many people, how many faculty throughout the university have actually at least mentored one Gemstone team. It must reach to a pretty large number. But anyway, by the time when I retired in 1972, I retired from Gemstone. I didn't retire from the university really until last summer.
Oh.
I still had some ties to the university until last summer. But when I retired from Gemstone in 72, we had a system and a process. I just looked at the website before we came on, and much of that is still in place. I think it's been tweaked and improved, but the basic structure is what we worked on in those 11 years, and I'm very happy that it's now a quarter of a century old, and that students are still benefiting from this great program. It was, I have to say, in my 44 years at Maryland, it was those years working as the Gemstone director were by far the most satisfying experiences that I had. I enjoyed it enormously.
Well, thank you. I want to move towards a wrap, and we're going to hand it to Dr. Lovell to make some closing comments. Two things, Jim, to what you said. First off, at last count, 222 faculty members have worked with Gemstone teams. That is incredible. That is an amazing statistic. Thank you, Dr. Skendel, for providing that. And I actually wanted to highlight not a question that was dropped into the Q&A box, but a comment by Priya. And I'm actually going to read it because I think it's amazing, and I think it's the example that we're exactly touched on tonight in this panel. It says, not a question, but a thank you from a 2009 alum. I'm going to defend my dissertation at Maryland in March, and I'm planning a career in academia. Gemstone set me on my current path in ways that I couldn't fully appreciate until after I had graduated. It instilled in me what I imagine will be a lifelong passion for research. It's exciting to hear more about the history and evolution of Gemstone. Here's to another fruitful and inspiring 25 years. Thank you, Priya, for that comment. That's frankly tremendous. And Dr. Lovell, we'll turn it over to you. But before that, thank you, Dr. Wallace. Thank you, Dr. Skendel. And thank you, Dr. Fuja.
Yes, my thanks too to all of the panelists and everyone else who joined us this evening as we kick off our 25th anniversary celebration. Our theme for this anniversary year is 25 years of inquiry and impact. And much of tonight's conversation was a reflection on that very theme. Gemstone has a rich history and a truly promising future. As we were preparing for tonight's conversation, I started thinking about what that future might look like. Where will Gemstone be in the next 25 years? And I hope you will all indulge me in sharing a few of my thoughts. On the subject of inquiry, the amount of scholarly work produced each year by our Gemstone teams is considerable, but there are tremendous opportunities that exist to disseminate this information even further. I think while we often think of research as something very scholarly and academic, there are much larger and broader communities and organizations that could benefit from what students, Gemstone students have learned and from what they've created. Of keen interest to me is encouraging and then supporting financially the ways that our students share the knowledge learned through their research. That would include traditional avenues like professional conferences and workshops, but also things like presentations to nonprofit groups and community organizations and other places where we might find like-minded agents of change. I want to see Gemstone support our students in publishing their research in archival journals, applying for patents, and identifying other ways to develop their intellectual property. I would also like to see our students and their research recognized in traditional and social media outlets. I see tremendous opportunity for research that originates in Gemstone to extend beyond the boundaries of this program. We have some examples, and I would like to see more where our projects have catalyzed bigger proposals for bigger projects that can be continued in the appropriate labs on campus. On the subject of impact, when Gemstone was founded at the University of Maryland, we've heard that it was on the forefront of living and learning programs. Even today, Gemstone is unique at the University of Maryland and beyond for its rigorous team-based research approach for undergraduate students. It is my hope that Gemstone will continue its efforts to frame itself as a research program within the larger context of excellence in undergraduate education, with a particular focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Much like our research results, these efforts might often incorporate novel approaches and outcomes that could be shared with our peers at the University of Maryland and on college campuses across the country. Even in my short time as director, I'm continually impressed with the passion our students have for this work, and I would like to be able to better support our student team's participation in these endeavors. Over the next year, as we mark this significant milestone in our history, we will be sharing with you more stories from 25 years of the Gemstone Honors Program. I hope you will join us and share with us your own reflections, anecdotes, visions for the future. For more information on what's coming up and how you can get involved, please follow our social media pages, check out our website, our LinkedIn group. Be on the lookout for emails throughout the year for other opportunities to engage with us and support Gemstone. And don't hesitate to email gems@umd.edu with any questions or to help support us. Last and certainly not least, I would like to say a thank you to everybody who made this evening possible. Of course, thank you to our panelists for being here and sharing their piece of history with us, and to Thomas Hahn and Maria Sebastian for moderating our conversation this evening. A hearty thank you to Ryan Hoffmaster, who serves on the Gemstone Alumni Board as our awards chair, for expertly organizing our event this evening. Thank you to Laura Fu, our 25th anniversary engagement chair, and the rest of the 25th anniversary committee and our alumni advisory board. So I know this doesn't always work well on Zoom, but maybe if we could just sort of give everyone a collective round of applause and imagine what that might sound like if we were in a big room with lots of people. And so with that, our event has concluded. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you all very soon, and please stay safe.